Hey there. Tonight, let me take you back, way back to 1350 BCE, to a kingdom that once controlled the trade routes between the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. You're lying here, comfortable in your bed, with your modern conveniences, your safety, your certainty of tomorrow. But imagine, just for tonight, that you're not. Imagine you're a merchant named Kizawatna, standing at the gates of Washukani, the capital of the Mitanni kingdom, watching smoke rise from distant fires that shouldn't be burning. You've heard the whispers in the marketplace. The Assyrians are growing stronger, the Hittites are pressing from the west, and inside these very walls, brothers plot against brothers for a throne that may not exist by next harvest. Your leather pouch holds clay tokens worth a fortune, or perhaps nothing at all, depending on who controls the city when the sun rises. The guards at the gate eye you suspiciously. Are you a merchant, a spy, or just another refugee? In this world, the distinction matters less than you'd think. So, dim the lights, settle into your covers, and let me tell you the unglamorous truth about how one of the ancient world's most powerful kingdoms simply vanished. Through your eyes, Kizawatana's eyes, you'll walk the treacherous roads, navigate the currency frauds, survive the bandits, and witness the brutal, mundane reality of a civilization's final days. You wake before dawn in your modest mud brick dwelling in Washukani's merchant quarter, the acrid smell of yesterday's oil lamps still hanging in the air. Your wife, Tashmishu, is already stirring the embers in the hearth, her movements practiced and quiet after 20 years of marriage. The clay tablets containing your trade contracts lie stacked against the wall, each one representing a fortune in tin, textiles, or horses, assuming the trade routes remain open, assuming the currency holds its value, assuming you live long enough to collect. Outside, you hear the first sounds of the city awakening, the creak of wooden wheels on stone, the bleating of goats being led to market, the guttural shouts of guards changing their watch. Your youngest son, barely 7 summers old, coughs in his sleep, that persistent cough that has plagued him since the last rains. The herbalist claims it's the dust from the construction sites where they're reinforcing the city walls. But you know better. It's fear. Even children can smell it now, seeping through the streets like morning fog. You reach for your worn leather traveling cloak, checking the hidden pocket where you keep your most valuable possession. Not gold or silver, but a small clay seal that marks you as a protected merchant under the king's authority. If only you could be certain which king would honor it by week's end. The morning prayer bells ring across the city, but they sound different today, almost mournful, as if the priests themselves know what's coming. You step into the street and immediately the complexity of Mitanni's crisis becomes tangible. Your neighbor, the coppersmith Shutana, is arguing with 3 men you don't recognize, Assyrian merchants by their accent, demanding payment in silver weight that follows Assur's standards, not Washukani's. The conversion rates changed again overnight, the 3rd time this month. What was worth 30 shekels yesterday might be worth 20 today, or 40, depending on which authority you recognize. You watch Shutana's face redden as he realizes his entire inventory, priced in the old standard, is now either worthless or impossibly expensive. The Assyrians smile with the confidence of men who know their king's armies are only 5 days' march away. You hurry past, but not before one of them notices your merchant's seal. His eyes narrow with interest, calculating. You know that look. It's the expression of a man deciding whether you're worth robbing now or following until you lead him to something more valuable. The street fills with more traders, craftsmen and laborers, all moving with the nervous energy of animals before a storm. At the corner where the street of potters meets the Grand Bazaar, you see fresh graffiti in Hurrian script. The throne bleeds while the people starve. Someone has tried to scrub it away, But the message remains visible, a ghost of dissent that everyone sees, but no one acknowledges. The Grand Bazaar sprawls before you like a living organism, pulsing with the heartbeat of commerce and desperation. You've been coming here for 30 years, since you were a boy carrying your father's goods, but never have you seen it like this. Half the stalls stand empty, their owners fled to countryside estates or foreign cities. Those who remain eye each other with suspicion, prices whispered rather than shouted, deals made in corners rather than open air. You approach your usual grain supplier, old Pudu Hepa, who sits surrounded by clay jars that should be full but sound hollow when the wind rocks them. She doesn't smile when she sees you, just holds up 3 fingers. 3 times the usual price. When you begin to protest, she leans forward, her voice barely above a whisper. The northern supply routes are cut, she tells you. The Assyrians control the crossing at the Kabur River. What grain reaches the city comes through Hittite middlemen who take their cut twice over. You do the calculations in your head. At these prices, your profit margin evaporates like morning dew. But without grain, your caravan cannot make the journey south. You're trapped between starvation and bankruptcy, the fundamental equation of a dying kingdom. Around you, other merchants engage in similar negotiations, their faces grave. A fight breaks out 2 stalls over when someone accuses another of using weighted scales. The market guards, who should intervene, simply watch, accepting bribes from both parties to stay neutral. Your business at the bazaar concluded with lighter purse and heavier heart. You make your way toward the administrative quarter, where your brother-in-law, Tushrata, works as a palace scribe. The streets here are wider, paved with cut stone rather than packed earth, but no less tense. Palace guards stand at every intersection, their bronze spear points catching the morning sun. They watch everyone with the paranoid attention of men who know that assassination attempts have become as common as morning prayers. You pass the house of General Artatama, or what remains of it, the walls blackened by fire, the doorway sealed with royal proclamation, declaring him a traitor. Just last month, he was leading the kingdom's northern defenses. Now his family begs for scraps in the streets, their nobility meaningless without his protection. This is the new mathematics of Mitanni. Loyalty plus time equals suspicion. You reach the scribal offices, a long building of baked brick, where dozens of men once recorded the kingdom's glory in cuneiform. Now, only a handful remain, documenting the steady dissolution of trade agreements, military defeats, and territorial losses. Tushrata greets you with exhausted eyes, his fingers stained with ink from copying royal decrees that contradict yesterday's royal decrees. He shows you the latest tablet, new taxes on merchant caravans, effective immediately, retroactive to last season. Your heart sinks as you realize this will consume half your remaining capital. Tushrata glances around nervously before leaning closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper that you strain to hear over the sound of styluses scratching on clay in the adjacent rooms. The Crown Prince and his younger brother are no longer speaking, he tells you. The palace is divided into 2 camps, each convinced the other plans a coup. The king, old and sick, refuses to name a clear successor, perhaps enjoying the power that comes from keeping everyone guessing, or perhaps too afraid that naming an heir would be signing his own death warrant. The scribes are being forced to maintain 2 sets of records, one for each faction, documenting different versions of reality that will become history, depending on who survives. Your brother-in-law's hands tremble as he describes the midnight summons, the interrogations about loyalty, the colleagues who simply stopped coming to work and were never mentioned again. You want to offer comfort, but what comfort exists when the very ground beneath the kingdom shifts like sand? He asks if you still plan to lead your caravan south next week. When you nod, his expression shifts to something between envy and pity. To leave is to risk bandits and foreign soldiers. To stay is to risk becoming collateral damage in a civil war everyone knows is coming, but no one dares name. He presses a small cylinder seal into your palm, his personal mark. If something happens to him, he says, perhaps you could get word to his daughter in the southern provinces. You leave the scribal offices with Tushratta's seal weighing heavy in your pocket. A responsibility you neither wanted nor can refuse. The sun climbs higher, and with it the city's temperature rises, bringing out the smell of too many people, living too close together with too little hope. You need to visit the caravan master, Ship-tu-Teshub, to finalize preparations for your southern journey. His compound sits near the eastern gate, where the dust from incoming and outgoing traffic coats everything in a fine brown layer that no amount of sweeping can clear. You find him arguing with his lead driver about the safety of the southern route. Bandits have grown bold, the driver insists, no longer content with simple robbery, but taking slaves to sell to the Assyrians. 3 caravans have disappeared completely in the last month. Ship-tu-Teshub counters that the northern routes are worse. At least bandits can be bribed, but armies take everything and leave only corpses. You listen to them debate death by degrees, wondering when mere survival became the height of ambition. The caravan master notices you and waves you over, his face a mask of forced optimism that doesn't reach his eyes. He shows you the manifest: 12 donkeys, 4 camels, 2 armed guards. It's half the size of your usual caravan, but it's all he can spare. The guards are young, barely older than boys, their fathers and older brothers already claimed by the army or the grave. The negotiation with Ship-tu-Teshub stretches into the afternoon, each detail requiring careful consideration when resources are scarce and trust scarcer. You settle on a departure 5 days hence, assuming the city gates remain open and the political situation doesn't explode into open warfare. The payment structure is complex, part in advance, part on safe arrival, with contingencies for various disasters that have become too common to be called unexpected. As you prepare to leave, a commotion erupts at the eastern gate. A rider gallops through, his horse foaming at the mouth, the man himself swaying in the saddle from exhaustion or wounds, or both. He bears the insignia of the border patrol, though his uniform is torn and blood-stained. Word spreads through the compound like wildfire. The fortress at Tel Brak has fallen to the Assyrians. That's only 6 days' march from here, closer than anyone expected the enemy to be. The implications ripple through the gathered merchants and traders. Tel Brak controlled the eastern trade routes. Without it, half the kingdom's remaining commerce is severed. You watch faces cycle through disbelief, fear, and finally, the grim acceptance that has become Mitanni's primary emotion. Ship-tu-Teshub immediately raises his prices by 1/3, supply and demand as merciless as any invading army. You have no choice but to accept, knowing that by tomorrow the price might be double, if caravans are leaving at all. You hurry home through streets transformed by the news of Tel Brak's fall. What was nervous energy this morning has become barely contained panic by afternoon. People cluster in doorways, sharing rumors that grow more catastrophic with each telling. The Assyrian army is a day away, no, 3 days. No, they're already in the city, disguised as merchants. The king is dead, the king has fled. The king has allied with the Assyrians against his own people. You recognize the sound of a civilization talking itself into collapse, each frightened whisper another crack in the foundation of order. At the Street of Bakers, you see a mob forming outside the shop of Hania, who everyone knows hoards grain. They demand she open her stores, sell at fair prices. She stands in her doorway with a bronze knife, her sons behind her with clubs, knowing that to give in is to be emptied out and left with nothing when starvation comes. You take a different route, But every street tells the same story. The social contracts that hold a city together, dissolving like salt in water. Near your home, you pass the temple of Hepat, where desperate people make offerings they can't afford to gods who seem to have abandoned them. The priests accept their gifts with the mechanical motions of men who have lost faith, but maintain ritual out of habit or fear of admitting the truth. You reach your home to find Tashmishu already packing, her movements efficient despite the fear you see in her eyes. She's heard the news, wives always do, their network of whispers more reliable than any official proclamation. Your son sits in the corner, that persistent cough worse now, perhaps from the dust of panic that fills the air, or perhaps from the dread that sits in everyone's chest like a stone. Tashmishu has already made the calculation every merchant's wife learns to make. What to take that's valuable enough to sustain life, but not so valuable as to make you a target. She's sewn gold pieces into the hem of her travelling cloak, hidden silver in false bottoms of water jars, distributed the family wealth across multiple hiding places, so that no single robbery can destroy you completely. You tell her about the caravan departing in 5 days. Watch her count on her fingers, calculating whether the city will last that long. Your neighbor's door slams, and through the thin walls you hear them arguing about whether to flee tonight or wait. Everyone is having the same conversation, the same terrible mathematics of survival. Your son asks if you're going to die. The question delivered with the matter-of-fact tone children adopt when the adult world stops making sense. You want to lie, to offer comfort, but lies are a luxury you can no longer afford. Instead, you tell him you're going to try very hard not to, which is perhaps the only honest answer left in Mitanni. Night falls like a curtain on a failed performance, and with it comes a different kind of danger. You've barred the door and shuttered the windows, but you can hear the city transforming outside. The rule of law, always more suggestion than certainty in these times, evaporates entirely when the sun sets. Through the cracks in the shutters, you see torches moving through the streets, whether carried by guards trying to maintain order, thieves looking for opportunities, or mobs seeking someone to blame, you cannot tell. Perhaps there's no difference anymore. A scream echoes from several streets over, cut short in a way that makes your wife clutch your arm. You blow out all but one oil lamp, sitting in near darkness to avoid attracting attention. Your son's coughing seems impossibly loud in the silence between disturbances. You give him watered wine with honey and herbs, hoping it will quiet his throat and perhaps help him sleep through whatever comes next. Tashmishu sits beside him, singing soft Hurrian lullabies that her mother sang to her, songs from a time when Mitanni was strong and children could sleep without fear. You position yourself by the door with your bronze dagger, knowing it's inadequate against serious threats but needing the illusion of control. Through the long hours, you listen to your city eating itself, the sounds of breaking pottery, splintering wood, and human anguish, creating a symphony of collapse that will haunt your dreams for whatever time you have left to dream. Dawn comes as a relief and a revelation. You've survived the night, but the city has transformed. From your rooftop, where you go to assess the situation, you can see smoke rising from at least a dozen fires, some still burning, others just smouldering remnants of what were once shops, homes, or dreams. The palace complex remains intact, its walls higher and guards more numerous than the ordinary quarters that bore the night's violence. The morning light reveals the cost of panic, bodies in the streets that no one dares to claim, doors hanging broken on their hinges. The market square you visited yesterday, now a scatter of overturned stalls and ruined goods. Yet somehow, impossibly, life continues. You see people emerging from their homes like survivors of a storm, checking on neighbors, beginning the grim work of cleanup and repair. Perhaps this is Mitanni's truth. Not a sudden dramatic collapse, but this slow grinding down. Each crisis leaving the kingdom a little weaker, a little less capable of recovering from the next blow. You return to find Tashmishu feeding your son thin barley gruel. All you can afford with grain prices what they are. She looks at you with a question in her eyes. Do we leave today? Try to escape while chaos provides cover? You shake your head. The caravan offers the only real chance of survival. Random flight would make you just another refugee on roads haunted by those who prey on desperation.
You venture out to check on your brother-in-law Tushratta, taking back alleys and less traveled routes to avoid the main thoroughfares, where guards might be restoring order with excessive force, or looters might still be operating. The scribal quarter has fared better than the merchant district, its proximity to the palace affording it some protection. But even here, you see signs of the night's chaos. The door to the records building stands open, unusual for a place where secrets are currency. Inside, you find devastation of a different kind. Not violence, but deliberate destruction. Clay tablets lie shattered on the floor, decades of history reduced to fragments. Tushratta sits among the ruins, his face blank with shock. They came in the night, he tells you, agents of one prince or another, destroying records of debts, alliances, treaties, anything that might be used against their master when the succession struggle turns violent. Your brother-in-law managed to save some tablets, hidden them in a water cistern, but most of the kingdom's administrative memory is gone. Without these records, no one knows who owes what to whom, which lands belong to which nobles, what agreements exist with foreign powers. It's a different kind of anarchy, the deliberate creation of confusion that allows those with power to rewrite reality to their advantage. Tushratta shows you one intact tablet, a trade agreement with a southern kingdom that might offer you safe passage, if you can make it that far. Your visit to Tushratta is interrupted by the arrival of palace guards. Not the regular sort, but elite troops, bearing the insignia of the crown prince. They move through the ruins with practiced efficiency, not looking for looters, but for specific tablets, specific information. Their captain, a scarred veteran named Shashta Tar, whom you recognize from better days, questions each scribe about what was destroyed, and more importantly, what might have been saved. His eyes linger on you, clearly wondering what a merchant is doing here so early after such a night. You explain your relationship to Tushratta, keeping your voice steady despite the fear crawling up your spine like a cold serpent. The captain nods slowly, then asks if you've seen any tablets bearing the seal of General Artatama, the one whose house was burned. The question is a trap, with no safe answer. Say yes, and you're potentially harboring treasonous documents. Say no, and you might be lying to the crown. You choose careful ignorance, suggesting that in such destruction, who could say what survived? The captain's smile is sharp as a blade, as he reminds you that merchants who trade with enemies of the crown often find their caravans mysteriously attacked by bandits. The threat is clear. Your neutrality is a luxury the dying kingdom can no longer afford. Everyone must choose a side, even if all sides lead to ruin. After the guards leave, taking several scribes with them for consultation, a euphemism everyone understands, you and Tushratta quickly gather what valuable information remains. He gives you a small collection of tablets wrapped in cloth, trade permits, route maps, and most importantly, a letter of introduction to a merchant family in Arafa who might shelter you if Washakani falls. These are his last gifts to you, the final treasures of a dying administration. As you prepare to leave, he asks you to take his daughter's dowry documents south with you. She's to be married to a merchant's son in 3 months, assuming there's still a kingdom to have weddings in. The documents are her only chance at a life beyond whatever horror is coming. You accept this burden too, adding it to the growing weight of other people's hopes you carry. The journey back to your house takes longer as the city begins to stir. You pass a bread line, where palace guards distribute grain from the royal stores, a gesture meant to prevent riots.
but one that reveals how desperate the situation has become. The people waiting are a mix of all classes: former nobles reduced to begging, craftsmen whose shops were destroyed, farmers who fled the countryside ahead of advancing armies. This is equality in collapse, where yesterday's social hierarchies mean nothing in the face of hunger. You recognize faces, people you've traded with, competed against, respected or despised, all reduced to the same basic need: survive another day. You reach home to find an unexpected visitor. Your cousin Mitanni from the countryside, his ox cart loaded with what remains of his possessions. His farm, only 2 days north, has been abandoned ahead of the Assyrian advance. He describes fields burning, livestock driven off or slaughtered, wells poisoned to deny them to the enemy. The systematic destruction of the kingdom's agricultural foundation means that even if the political crisis resolves, famine will follow like a shadow. His family of 6 looks to you with the hollow eyes of people who've already seen too much. Your wife exchanges glances with you. Your house can barely sustain your own family, let alone 6 more mouths. But this is family, and in times like these, family is the only institution that hasn't completely failed. You make room, share your dwindling supplies, and try not to calculate how many fewer days your food will last. Mitanni has information from the countryside that the city doesn't yet know. The Assyrians aren't just conquering, they're recruiting. Every village that surrenders peacefully is offered a place in the new order. Those that resist are made examples of. It's clever and cruel. Why fight when you can make people complicit in their own conquest? Your cousin faced this choice and chose flight, but you can see in his eyes the doubt about whether he chose correctly. Tomorrow, you might face the same decision. The third night in your increasingly crowded home brings new challenges. Your cousin's youngest child falls ill with the same cough that plagues your son, and now you wonder if it's not dust or fear, but some sickness spreading through the weakened city. The herbalist, when you can find her, demands payment in silver, not the clay tokens that are becoming worthless. Her supplies are running low, she explains, and she must think of her own survival. You pay what she asks, knowing you're being extorted, but having no alternative. The medicine is probably diluted, but it's better than nothing. That night, you hold a family council by flickering lamplight. The caravan leaves in 2 days, but you only have papers for your immediate family. Mitanni understands. He's seen enough to know that survival often means horrible choices. He asks only that you take his eldest son, barely 14, as an apprentice. The boy could help with the caravan, and more importantly, he'd have a chance at life. You look at the boy, Yalampa, seeing in him the same mixture of fear and determination that you feel. Another responsibility, another life depending on your increasingly uncertain plans. Your wife nods slightly. She's already made the calculation that an extra pair of hands might be worth the extra mouth to feed. You agree, knowing that you're splitting a family, but perhaps saving a life. The penultimate day before departure dawns with ominous news. The king has finally spoken, appearing on the palace balcony to address the crowds that gather whenever rumors exceed tolerance. You join the throng, needing to hear for yourself what proclamation might affect your escape. The king, ancient and swaying, declares that the reports of Telbrak's fall are enemy propaganda, that Mitanni remains strong, that anyone spreading defeatist rumors will be executed. The crowd listens in stunned silence. Everyone knows Telbrak has fallen. Refugees from there are sleeping in the streets. This isn't leadership. It's delusion. Or perhaps something worse. A ruler so disconnected from reality that he believes his own lies. As the king retreats into the palace, the crowd's silence breaks into angry murmurs. Someone throws a piece of rotting fruit at the palace walls. Guards move to arrest him, but the crowd closes ranks, protecting him. It's a small act of defiance, but significant. The fear that held the kingdom together is breaking down, replaced by anger at those who led them to this point. You slip away before violence erupts, but you can feel the change in the city's mood. Desperation is transforming into rage, and rage in a dying city is like fire in a granary. It consumes everything and leaves only ash. You hurry to the caravan compound to confirm your departure, finding Ship to Teshub surrounded by desperate merchants offering anything for a place on the dwindling number of caravans. Your final full day in Washukani is spent in frantic preparation. The city market, what remains of it, operates on pure barter now. Nobody trusts the currency. You trade your furniture for dried meat, your wife's jewelry for medicine, your spare clothing for water skins. Each transaction feels like selling pieces of your life. Memories converted into survival supplies. At the leatherworker's stall, you recognize the wife of a nobleman who once wouldn't have acknowledged your existence. Now trading her silk robes for sturdy boots. The social order hasn't just collapsed. It's been revealed as the illusion it always was. Young Yalampa proves useful, his farm-raised strength helping carry supplies, while his rural knowledge identifies which foods will last longest on the road. You're teaching him the basics of trade, though what use such knowledge will have in whatever world emerges from Mitanni's ashes remains uncertain. As evening approaches, you make one last visit to your family's shrine, the small altar where generations have made offerings to Hepat and Teshub. The clay figurines seem smaller than you remember, their painted eyes unable to offer the comfort you seek. You leave a final offering, not because you believe it will help, but because the ritual itself is a connection to better times, to the parents who taught you these prayers, to the world that's ending. Tomorrow you leave. Tonight you try to memorize the city that made you, knowing you'll likely never see it again. The morning of departure arrives grey and dust-laden, as if the sky itself mourns Mitanni's fate. Your family gathers in the courtyard before dawn, each carrying what they can, leaving behind what they must. Your cousin Mitanni Muwa tries to maintain composure as he embraces his son Yalampa one last time, whispering instructions and blessings that must last a lifetime. The boy's younger siblings cling to him, too young to understand why he's leaving, but old enough to sense the finality. Your own son, despite his illness, insists on walking rather than being carried, a small act of dignity in undignified times. The streets to the caravan compound are already crowded with others fleeing, a river of humanity flowing toward the gates. Some have hired guards, others travel in groups for protection. Many walk alone with nothing but desperation as their companion. You keep your family close, Yalampa included now, your hand on your dagger, though you know it offers more psychological than practical protection. At the compound, chaos reigns. Ship to Teshub tries to maintain order as desperate people offer bribes, threats, and pleas for spaces that don't exist. Your documents are checked 3 times, your payment confirmed, your goods loaded onto tired-looking donkeys. The 2 young guards assigned to your caravan look overwhelmed already, and you haven't even left the city. As the sun rises, burning through the dust, the caravan begins to form into something resembling order. The caravan finally moves as the sun reaches its first quarter. A ragged line of 12 donkeys, 4 camels, 24 people, and enough desperation to populate a small city. You walk beside your family's donkey, Tashmishu riding with your sick son, while Yalampa leads the animal. The gates of Washukani loom before you,
Massive cedar doors reinforced with bronze that once proclaimed the city's strength, but now seem like the jaws of a trap finally opening to let you escape. The guards at the gate, different from yesterday, demand additional fees for passage. Ship-to Teshub argues, but everyone knows this is simply another form of taxation on survival. You contribute your share, watching silver that could buy food disappear into corrupt pockets. As you pass through the gates, you turn for one last look at the city. Smoke still rises from various quarters. The palace sits like a tumor on the city's heart, and somewhere in those streets, your cousin and his family wait for their own fate. The road ahead stretches into heat shimmer and uncertainty. Behind, other caravans are forming, other families making the same terrible choice. 100 yards from the gates, you hear them close with a definitive thud. The city is rationing its exits now, controlling the hemorrhage of its population. You've made it out, but the hardest part has just begun. The southern road is infamous even in good times. In these times, it's a gamble with death as the house advantage.
The first day on the road teaches harsh lessons about the difference between urban hardship and wilderness survival. The packed earth beneath your feet radiates heat like a cooking stone, and the dust kicked up by the caravan coats everything: your throat, your eyes, your food. Your son's cough worsens in the dry air, each hack bringing up dust-coloured phlegm that frightens you more than you'll admit. The two guards, boys named Ea Gamil and Puzur Ashur, attempt to look vigilant, but clearly have no idea what they're watching for. When a group of riders appears on a distant ridge, they panic, nearly dropping their spears before Ship-to Teshub calmly identifies them as another merchant caravan, not bandits. The learning curve out here is steep and often fatal. By midday, the heat becomes unbearable. You stop at what was once a way station, now just ruins, and a well that might or might not be poisoned. Ship-to Teshub drops a copper piece into the water, an old merchant's trick. When it doesn't turn green, he declares it's safe enough. You fill your water skins while keeping watch, knowing that wells are where the desperate congregate and where predators, human and otherwise, wait. An old woman traveling with another family collapses from heat. There's brief discussion about whether to help her or save the water. In the end, humanity wins over pragmatism, but you can see the calculation in everyone's eyes changing. How many more days before compassion becomes an unaffordable luxury? As evening approaches, you reach what should be the first night's campsite, a depression in the landscape that offers some protection from wind and wandering eyes. Other caravans have had the same idea. 3 groups cluster here, eyeing each other with suspicion. Ship-to Teshub negotiates with the other caravan masters for watch duties and well access, the kind of temporary alliance that dissolves the moment it's no longer mutually beneficial. You help set up camp, teaching Yalampa how to arrange supplies to protect against both theft and sand rats. The boy learns quickly, his rural pragmatism serving him better than city sophistication would. As darkness falls, the temperature plummets. The same desert that tried to cook you alive now threatens to freeze you. Your family huddles together under wool blankets that seemed excessive this morning, but now feel inadequate. The stars emerge in numbers you never saw in the city, their cold light offering no comfort. Around the various campfires, you hear fragments of conversation. Rumors of which cities have fallen, which roads are cut, who might offer sanctuary. Everyone has a theory about Mitanni's collapse, but no one has solutions. The guards take first watch, trying to look confident, but you notice Ship-to Teshub quietly assigns experienced merchants to shadow them. Trust is earned out here, usually through not dying. You try to sleep, but every sound could be bandits approaching. Every shadow could hide death. This is night 1 of perhaps 20, if you're lucky. You're awakened before dawn by shouting. One of the other caravans discovered they've been robbed in the night, not by bandits, but by one of their own members, who slipped away with food and water. The violation of trust hits harder than any external threat would have. If you can't trust those traveling beside you, the journey becomes impossible. The robbed caravan wants to search everyone's possessions, convinced the thief might still be among you all. Tensions rise as exhausted, frightened people face the possibility of violence from their own temporary allies. Ship 2 Teshub manages to defuse the situation by pointing out that searching would delay everyone and make you all targets for real bandits. The other caravan leaves earlier than planned, trust broken. One less group to share watch duties with. Your own people eye each other differently now, wondering who might break under pressure. Yalampa asks you quietly if you think someone from your caravan might steal. You tell him the truth. Desperation makes everyone capable of things they'd never consider in normal times. The boy nods, solemnly, and you see him discreetly checking your family's supplies, memorizing what you have and where it's stored. He's learning the wrong lessons for a merchant, but the right ones for survival. As the sun rises and you prepare to continue south, you notice vultures circling something far off the road. Everyone notices, but no one suggests investigating. Some knowledge is too expensive to acquire. The second day's march takes you through what was once fertile farmland, now abandoned fields returning to wilderness. The irrigation channels that made this land valuable lie broken, their water long since evaporated or diverted. You pass farmhouses with doors standing open, livestock pens empty, fruit trees already being reclaimed by the desert. This is the slow death that precedes the dramatic one. When farmers flee, cities starve. Yalampa walks silently beside you, recognizing the signs of agricultural collapse that city dwellers might miss. He points out where raiders burned grain stores, where wells were deliberately destroyed, where someone made a last stand and lost. His knowledge is useful, but his sadness is palpable. This could have been his future, now erased. At midday, you encounter refugees heading north, back toward the city you fled. They tell of the southern roads being cut, of Assyrian advance forces already controlling the passes. Ship 2 Teshub questions them carefully, trying to separate panic from fact. The truth seems to be that some routes remain open, but change daily. The safe path of yesterday becomes today's killing field. You're traveling on old information and hope, a dangerous combination. Your son's fever rises with the afternoon heat. Tashmishu holds him, singing softly, but you can see fear in her eyes. If he worsens, you'll have to choose between stopping to care for him or continuing with the caravan. No parent should face such mathematics. By late afternoon, the decision comes whether you want it or not. Your son's condition deteriorates to the point where he can no longer ride without falling. His breathing becomes labored, each intake a struggle against lungs filling with something more than dust. Ship 2 Teshub calls a halt at a ruined caravanserai, its walls offering minimal shelter, but better than the open desert. The other merchants mutter about delays, about sitting targets, but most have children themselves and understand the agony of your position. Tashmishu prepares what medicine remains, while you and Yalampa search the ruins for anything useful. Old wood for fire, forgotten supplies, anything. Instead, you find evidence of previous tragedies, scattered bones that might be human or animal, dark stains on stone walls, scratched messages in various scripts warning of dangers or proclaiming final words. This place has seen many endings. As night falls, your son's fever breaks temporarily, allowing him to take some water. The relief is momentary. You know this is how illness works. Waves of crisis and respite, until the body either wins or surrenders. The guards report movement in the darkness beyond the ruins. Could be jackals. Could be worse. Everyone sleeps in shifts, weapons close at hand. You sit beside your son, watching his labored breathing, and make bargains with gods you're not sure exist anymore. Let him survive this night, this journey. Let him see whatever comes after Mitanni's fall. The gods, as usual, don't answer. Morning brings mixed blessings. Your son breathes easier. The medicine or rest or sheer will keeping him stable enough to travel. But the dawn also reveals that the movement in the night wasn't jackals. Human footprints circle the caravanserai, many of them, studying your defenses. You were watched, evaluated, and, for reasons unknown, left alone. Perhaps your group looked too poor to rob, too strong to attack easily. Or perhaps the watchers were refugees themselves, as frightened of you as you would be of them. The caravan prepares to move with increased urgency. Everyone understands now that you're being tracked, that the desert has eyes, and those eyes are calculating. Ship to Tashub changes the planned route, taking a longer, but hopefully less predictable path. The detour will add 2 days to the journey. 2 days your supplies might not cover. But predictability means death out here. As you walk, Yalampa spots something ahead. A merchant's cart, abandoned but recent. The goods are gone, but the cart itself might be salvageable. Ship to Tashub investigates carefully, aware this could be bait for an ambush. Inside he finds blood, still tacky, and a child's toy wooden horse. Another family's journey ended here, their story concluded mid-sentence. You take what's useful, the wheels, some rope, trying not to think about who might be watching you scavenge from the dead. The desert makes pragmatists of everyone, or it makes them corpses. A changed route takes you through terrain that explains why it's less travelled. The road, if it can be called that, winds through rocky badlands where a dozen men could hide behind any formation. Your progress slows to a crawl as the donkeys struggle with the uneven ground. One stumbles, nearly losing its load, and in the scramble to steady it, precious water spills onto thirsty ground that drinks it instantly. Every loss is calculated in days of survival shortened. The young guards are near panic, jumping at every shadow, exhausting themselves with hypervigilance. Eagermill actually drops his spear when a hawk's cry startles him, earning disgusted looks from the merchants who are depending on these boys for protection. By midday, the heat in the rocky canyon becomes suffocating, trapped between stone walls that radiate yesterday's heat while absorbing today's. Your son drifts in and out of consciousness, his fever returning despite the medicine. Yalampa walks beside the donkey, steadying him when he sways, showing a gentleness that belies his farm-rough hands. You're growing fond of this boy who should be home helping with harvest, instead of learning how civilizations die. Then, from ahead, Ship to Tashub raises his hand for halt. There's something in the path, not an obstacle but an offering. A pile of goods sits in the road's center, preserved foods, full water skins, even some silver. It's either an offering to the gods, a trap, or something stranger. No one touches it. In this world, gifts are more dangerous than threats. The mystery of the offering resolves in the worst way. As your caravan carefully skirts around it, men emerge from concealment. Not bandits, but soldiers. Assyrian by their armor and bearing. Your heart stops, then hammers as their leader, a captain with the weathered look of a career military man, approaches with empty hands raised.
He speaks accented but clear Hurrian, explaining they're not here to rob, but to recruit. The Assyrian Empire offers safe passage to those who provide information about Mitanni's defenses, troop movements, supply stores. Collaboration buys survival. The caravan freezes in terrible indecision. Shiptu Teshub steps forward, his merchant's instinct for negotiation overcoming fear. "What kind of information?" he asks. The captain smiles. Routes, guard positions, where the royal treasury might be hidden, which nobles might switch sides for the right price. Nothing treasonous, he says with irony that escapes no one. Just practical intelligence for practical people. You feel the weight of Tushrata's tablets in your pack. Information that could buy your family's safety, but doom others. Yalampa looks at you, waiting for guidance you don't have. Some of the merchants are clearly considering the offer. What loyalty do they owe a kingdom that's already dead? Others grip their weapons, preferring honest combat to dishonest survival. The moment stretches like heated metal, ready to snap. Your son coughs, a wet, dying sound, and suddenly your decision becomes clear. You'll do whatever keeps him alive, even if it damns you. The negotiation becomes a twisted marketplace, where loyalty is currency and betrayal the goods for sale. 3 merchants step forward immediately, eager to trade information for passage. They describe guard positions at Washukani's gates, the weakness in the eastern wall, which granaries still hold food. Each detail is another nail in the city's coffin. But these men have families too. Children who need to eat, futures that require surviving the present. Others refuse. An old spice trader named Adad Nirari actually spitting at the captain's feet. The Assyrians don't react to the insult, professional enough to expect resistance. The captain's eyes find you, sensing hesitation that might be turned. He mentions that the Assyrians have physicians, medicine that could help a sick child. The offer hangs between you like a blade. Tashmishu grips your arm, her fingers saying what her voice cannot. Our son is dying. But Yalampa stands straighter. This boy you've known for days showing more backbone than you feel. He quietly reminds you that his father chose flight over collaboration, that some prices are too high. The weight of the tablets in your pack grows heavier. They contain troop movements, but old ones. Trade agreements, but with kingdoms that might not exist. Would sharing useless information be betrayal or cleverness? The captain waits patiently. He has time. You don't. Finally, Shiptu Teshub makes a merchant's compromise. Safe passage for no information. Just silence about seeing Assyrian forces. The captain considers, then agrees. Sometimes neutrality is its own form of intelligence. The Assyrians grant passage, but not without cost. They confiscate half the caravan's remaining food and water as transit tax, leaving you with supplies that might last to the next settlement. They also take the 2 young guards, not by force, but by offer. Join the Assyrian auxiliary forces, or try surviving the desert alone. Ea Gamil and Puzur Ashur barely hesitate. They're soldiers without a kingdom, and the Assyrians offer what Mitanni no longer can. Regular pay, food, and a future. Their departure leaves the caravan essentially defenseless. But perhaps that makes you less threatening, less worth robbing, as the Assyrians disappear into the Badlands, taking your guards and hopes of armed protection with them. The caravan continues in shocked silence. Everyone processes their choices differently. Those who gave information avoid eye contact, marked by invisible shame. Those who refused wonder if pride will keep their children fed. You fall somewhere between, having kept your secrets, but knowing you would have sold them for medicine that worked. The road ahead seems longer now. each step taking you further from who you were, and closer to who survival demands you become. Yalampa walks beside you, and you realize this boy has become your moral compass. His simple rural ethics, more reliable than your merchant's calculations. Your son sleeps fitfully on the donkey, his breathing slightly easier. The Assyrian medicine might have saved him, but at what cost to your soul? These are the mathematics of collapse. Integrity divided by necessity equals survival, with conscience as the remainder.
2 days after the Assyrian encounter, the caravan reaches what should be a thriving trade post, but finds instead a ghost town. The settlement of Habu, once a vital rest stop on the southern route, stands empty. Doors hang open, market stalls abandoned, with goods still displayed, as if everyone simply vanished mid-transaction. The silence is more unsettling than destruction would be. At least violence leaves evidence of what happened. This emptiness offers only questions. Ship 2 Teshub organizes a careful search for supplies and, more importantly, information. You and Yalampa explore what was once an inn, finding meals half-eaten, beds unmade, a child's doll sitting in a chair as if waiting for its owner's return. The only clue is scratched on a wall in charcoal. The plague came with the northern wind. Disease, the invisible army that conquers more thoroughly than any human force. Your blood runs cold as you think of your son's persistent cough, the fever that comes and goes. What if it's not dust or exhaustion, but the beginning of something worse? The caravan quickly gathers what supplies they can find. The dead don't need them. But everyone touches things reluctantly, wondering if death lingers on surfaces, in the air, in the very act of breathing. You leave Habu faster than you entered, but you can't escape the feeling that you're carrying something with you. Something that was waiting in that empty place, the travelers foolish enough to stop. The plague fear spreads through the caravan faster than any disease could. People walk further apart, share less, eye anyone who coughs with suspicion. The fragile community you'd built through shared hardship begins to fracture. A merchant named Enlil Bani develops a fever and is quietly, but firmly, encouraged to travel at the rear of the caravan. His wife weeps, but no one offers comfort that requires proximity. Your own son's condition becomes a source of sideways glances and unspoken fears. Is his illness what emptied Habu? Are you all doomed to die on this road, not from bandits or starvation, but from something too small to see? Yalampa surprises you by refusing to distance himself from your family. When you tell him he should protect himself, he responds with rural wisdom. Death comes when it comes, but abandoning family, even adopted family, invites a different kind of death, one that kills the soul before the body. His loyalty shames those who've stepped away. That night, camping under stars that seem colder and more distant than ever, Enlil Bani's fever breaks. He'll live, but the damage to the caravan's cohesion is done. Trust, once broken by fear, doesn't easily mend. Ship 2 Teshub tries to maintain order, but you can see in his eyes that he's calculating too. How many need to fall before the supplies last to journey's end? Everyone is doing that mathematics now. The cruel arithmetic of group survival, where fewer mouths might mean salvation for the rest. On the 15th day of your journey, salvation appears as a smudge on the horizon that slowly resolves into the walls of Arafah. The city still stands, still functions, still maintains the pretense of civilization. The sight brings tears to eyes that thought they'd forgotten how to cry from anything but pain. But approach, reveals the cost of survival. Massive refugee camps sprawl outside the walls. Thousands of people living in conditions that make your road hardships seem luxurious. The city accepts only those who can pay, prove useful skills, or have connections. The tablets Tushratta gave you, the letter of introduction to the merchant family, become more precious than gold. Without them, you'd join the masses waiting for charity that never comes. The gate guards are different from Washakanis, professional, incorruptible, or at least too expensive to bribe with what you have left. They examine your documents with the thorough attention of men who know that one mistake, one suspicious person allowed entry, could mean their deaths. The merchant family name on Tushratta's letter carries weight. One guard leaves to verify, returning with an older merchant who eyes you carefully. He asks questions only someone from Washakani would know the answers to. Finally satisfied, he nods. You're allowed entry, but the others in your caravan face harder scrutiny. Some make it through. Others are turned away to join the camps. You want to help them, but you have nothing left to give. Yalampa supports your stumbling son as you pass through the gates, entering a city that might offer safety, or might simply be the next stage of collapse. Inside Arafa's walls, you discover a city pretending the world isn't ending. The markets function, goods are sold, life continues with a desperate normalcy that feels more unsettling than Washakani's open panic. The merchant family, the Kassites who've traded here for generations, receives you with cautious hospitality. They offer you space in their compound's guest quarters, basic food, and most preciously, information. Arafa survives by playing all sides, paying tribute to Assyria, maintaining trade with the Hittites, declaring loyalty to Mitanni, while knowing that loyalty is meaningless. It's a balancing act that requires constant adjustment, and everyone knows it will eventually fail. Your son is taken to a physician, a competent woman who diagnoses his illness as desert lung, serious but treatable with rest and proper medicine. The relief nearly breaks you. For the first time in weeks, his survival seems possible. Yalampa helps settle your family, his presence now so natural that explaining his relationship to you seems unnecessary. He's simply family now, forged by road and hardship into bonds stronger than blood. But safety is relative. The Kassite patriarch, Kudur-Enlil, makes clear that your stay is temporary. Arafa has no room for permanent refugees. You must find work, contribute, or move on. He offers you a position in his trading house, your knowledge of Washakani's former markets valuable even in their death throes. It's a lifeline, but one that comes with understanding. You're useful only as long as your information remains current. Days in Arafa develop a rhythm that almost resembles normal life, if you don't look too closely at the cracks. You work in Kudur-Enlil's trading house, your knowledge of northern routes and abandoned Mitanni settlements proving valuable as merchants scramble to salvage what they can from the kingdom's corpse. Yalampa apprentices with the younger traders, his quick mind and rural pragmatism earning respect. Your son slowly improves, color returning to his cheeks, his cough diminishing to occasional reminders of how close death came. Tashmishu finds work with the compound's weavers, her skills still valuable, even if the world that valued them is dying. But news from the north shatters any illusion of permanence. Washukani has fallen, not to siege or assault, but to internal collapse. The two princes' conflict finally exploded into civil war, brother killing brother, while the Assyrians simply walked in to claim what remained. Your cousin Mitanni Mua and his family's fate is unknown, probably unknowable. Tushratta, whose tablets saved you,
is reported dead, executed for possessing the wrong information at the wrong time. The guilt of survival sits heavy on you. Why did you escape when better people didn't? At night, refugees from Washukani arrive with increasingly horrific stories. The palace burned with loyalists inside. The temples were looted, their gold sent to Assyria, their priests enslaved or killed. The great library, repository of centuries of knowledge, was deliberately destroyed. Its tablets crushed to powder, so no one could claim Mitanni's history. The fall of Washukani changes Arafa's delicate balance. The Assyrians, no longer needing to maintain the fiction of Mitanni's existence, demand increased tribute. The city's leaders meet in endless councils, debating whether to submit completely or attempt resistance. You're not invited to these meetings, but Kudur-Enlil returns from them aged by each discussion. The simple truth is that Arafa lacks the strength to resist, but can't afford the tribute demanded. It's the same mathematics that doomed Washukani, just at a different stage of calculation. Your position becomes precarious as your information about Mitanni becomes obsolete. What use is knowledge of dead trade routes, fallen cities, executed merchants? Kudur-Enlil hints that you should consider moving on, perhaps south to Babylon, where Mitanni refugees are gathering. But travel requires resources you don't have, and your son, though improved, isn't strong enough for another desert journey. Yalampa suggests something that surprises you. He's been learning from the younger merchants about new opportunities in the chaos. Salvage rights to abandoned Mitanni settlements are being sold. Dangerous work, competing with bandits and Assyrian patrols for leftover wealth, but potentially profitable. It's grave robbing dressed in merchants' clothes, but grave robbing might be the only growth industry in a dying world. You consider it, wondering what other moral boundaries you'll cross before this ends, if it ends. The decision to attempt salvage work comes not from courage, but from mathematics. Your savings dwindle, your usefulness decreases, and Arafa's patience with refugees wears thin. Kudur-Enlil, perhaps from kindness, or perhaps to be rid of a potential burden, provides initial backing for a salvage expedition to an abandoned Mitanni trading post 2 days north. The investment is minimal: a donkey, basic supplies, and unofficial permission that might or might not protect you from Assyrian patrols. Yalampa will come with you while Tashmishu and your son remain in Arafa's relative safety. The separation terrifies you, but taking a still weak child into bandit territory would be murder disguised as family unity. The night before departure, you sit with your son, teaching him the merchant's marks your father taught you, the secret signs that identify trustworthy traders. He's too young to need this knowledge, but in this world, childhood ends when safety does. Tashmishu gives you a small clay tablet she's made, pressed with your family seal. If you don't return, this proves your son's inheritance rights to whatever meaningless property claims might survive the chaos. It's planning for your death, practical and heartbreaking. Yalampa spends the evening maintaining equipment with the focused attention of someone who understands that small oversights become fatal mistakes. He's no longer the farm boy you met weeks ago, but something harder, shaped by necessity into what the world demands. Tomorrow, you become grave robbers. Tonight, you pretend there's still dignity in survival. The journey north feels like traveling backward through time, each mile undoing weeks of progress towards safety. You and Yalampa move at night when possible, hiding during the day, becoming the kind of shadows you once feared. The abandoned trading post, when you finally reach it, tells a story of graduated collapse. First, the valuable goods were taken, then the useful ones, then anything that could burn. What remains are bones of commerce, broken pottery, scattered tablets, and the ghosts of prosperity. But experience teaches you to look deeper. Merchants hide their most valuable goods, and panic makes people forget their caches. In a wall cavity, behind what was once the counting house, you find a small collection of silver pieces, overlooked in someone's final flight. Beneath floorboards in the inn, Yolampa discovers hidden spices, still aromatic, worth their weight in gold to those who remember when food had flavor. It's enough to justify the journey, barely. But success attracts attention. On your second night, you hear them before you see them. Other scavengers, less patient with searching, more willing to take from the living what the dead no longer provide. You and Yolampa hide in a root cellar, breathing through cloth to muffle the sound, listening to boots pass overhead. They find some of what you found, curse at the slim pickings, and eventually leave. You wait another hour before emerging, legs cramped, lungs full of dust, but alive. This is your new profession, stealing from the dead while avoiding becoming dead yourself. The return journey to Arafa nearly ends in disaster when you encounter an Assyrian patrol. There's no hiding, they've seen you, and running would mean arrows in your backs. The officer approaches, eyeing your salvage with professional interest. He knows what you are, what you're doing, and by rights could take everything, including your lives. But he offers a deal instead. The Assyrians need local guides who know the abandoned places, the hidden routes, the merchant caches that official scouts might miss. Collaborate and you keep half your findings plus gain protection. Refuse and he doesn't need to finish the threat. You look at Yolampa, seeing your own moral exhaustion reflected in his eyes. 6 weeks ago, you would have died rather than help invaders. Now, you calculate percentages. Half of something beats all of nothing. You agree, hating yourself, but not enough to choose righteousness over survival. The officer provides you with a clay token, a pass that marks you as an Assyrian asset. It will protect you from patrols, but mark you as a traitor to any Mitanni loyalists still fighting their doomed resistance. Yolampa says nothing during the negotiation, but that night, camping within sight of Arafa's walls, he asks quietly if there's anything left you wouldn't do to survive. You don't answer, because the honest response would be no, and speaking it aloud would make it too real. The city guards recognize the Assyrian token when you present it. Their expressions shift from suspicion to contempt. You're allowed entry, but you've crossed a line that everyone can see. Your return to Arafa with the Assyrian token changes everything. Kudur Enlil accepts your salvage but distances himself personally. You're useful but tainted, like a tool that works but leaves dirty hands. Other refugees avoid you in the compound, whispering, "Collaborator," just loud enough for you to hear. Only Tashmishu welcomes you without judgment, though you see questions in her eyes. Your son, recovering well now, runs to embrace you, too young to understand why others pull their children away from his. The silver and spices you salvaged buy a few weeks of security, but the real payment is in information. The Assyrians want detailed maps of every abandoned settlement, every hidden water source, every merchant's cache you know about. You provide them. Each piece of intelligence another betrayal of the dead, who trusted those secrets to fellow traders. Yolampa helps with the mapping, his memory for detail invaluable. But he no longer looks at you with respect. He follows from duty to your family, from gratitude for saving him from the roads. But the moral education you once provided has reversed. Now he's teaching you, through his silent disappointment, that survival and living aren't the same thing. One evening, a young Mitanni widow spits at your feet in the market. Her husband died defending Washikani, while you guide his killers to leftover treasures. You want to explain the impossible mathematics that brought you here. But what words could justify the unjustifiable? You wipe the spit away and continue shopping, adding shame to the growing collection of things you carry.
The equilibrium of shame and survival breaks when news arrives that changes everything. The Assyrians aren't simply conquering, they're reorganizing, offering former Mitanni citizens full membership in their empire if they prove their loyalty through service. It's not just collaboration anymore, but transformation. Becoming Assyrian in all but blood. The offer divides Arafa's refugees into bitter camps. Some see it as the only realistic future, others as the ultimate betrayal. Families split, friendships end, and violence erupts in the compound when a young man attacks his father for considering the offer. You're already marked as a collaborator, so the decision seems made for you. But Tashmishu raises a question that stops you cold. What identity will your son inherit? Will he grow up Assyrian, never knowing the songs, stories, and traditions of Mitanni? Or will he carry that heritage like a secret wound, forever caught between who he is and who he must pretend to be? Yalampa provides unexpected wisdom, suggesting that perhaps identity isn't about kingdoms or empires, but about smaller things, family traditions, personal honor, the choice to help others when you could simply help yourself. He's describing a kind of resistance that doesn't require weapons, a preservation that doesn't need walls. But even as you consider this, an Assyrian administrator arrives at the compound with documents. Your mapping work has been valuable. They're offering you official position as a surveyor for the new provincial government, with salary, protection, and citizenship for your family. The document sits before you like a verdict. Sign, and Mitanni dies a little more. Don't sign, and your family might not survive what comes next. You sign. The stylus feels heavier than any burden you've carried, and your name on the clay tablet looks foreign, like someone else's life being documented. Yalampa watches without expression. Tashmishu holds your son closer. And you wonder if this is what death feels like, not a stopping, but a transformation into something unrecognizable. The Assyrian administrator nods efficiently, providing you with new identification tokens, a residence permit for a better district, and instructions for your first assignment, surveying the ruins of Washikani itself for salvageable materials. The irony is perfect. You'll officially oversee the dismantling of your birthplace, the final insult to injury. That night, your family doesn't celebrate their newfound security. Your son asks why everyone looks sad when good things happened. How do you explain that survival can feel like defeat, that safety can taste like ash? Yalampa requests permission to leave, to try reaching Babylon, where Mitanni refugees are supposedly gathering to preserve what they can of the culture. You want to refuse, to keep this adopted son who's become your conscience, but you've taken enough from him. You give him silver, supplies, and a letter of recommendation that carefully avoids mentioning your Assyrian affiliation. He leaves at dawn, and with him goes the last person who remembered who you used to be before the mathematics of survival changed you into someone else. Your biological son will grow up Assyrian, never knowing that his father once had principles that seemed worth more than life. 3 months later, you stand in the ruins of Washukani, officially cataloguing what can be salvaged from the palace complex. The city you fled in terror is now a corpse, being methodically stripped. Assyrian work crews dismantle buildings stone by stone, loading them onto carts bound for new construction projects in Assur. You mark which structures contain valuable materials, which wells still function, which areas hold nothing but memories and ash. In what was once the scribal quarter where Tushrata worked, you find fragments of tablets he might have written, but they're too broken to read. Their words scattered like the people who wrote them. Your son, healthier now and growing rapidly, accompanies you some days. He doesn't remember the city alive, knows it only as this archaeological site where his father earns Assyrian silver.
When he asks about a burned building, you tell him it was a temple, but you don't tell him you were married there. When he wonders about the skeleton still wearing bronze armor in what was the guard quarter, you explain about the Civil War, but don't mention the man was someone you once drank beer with after successful trades. You're teaching him history, drained of personal meaning. Facts, without the feelings that make them matter. This is the new education. How to walk through graveyards without seeing ghosts. How to build futures on foundations of forgetting. One day, sifting through rubble, you find it, your family's shrine. The small clay figures of Hepat and Teshub, somehow intact despite the destruction around them. You pocket them quickly, a theft of your own past. The only crime that still feels like virtue.
Your work in Wushikani is nearly complete when you encounter someone you never expected to see again. Your cousin, Mitanni Muwa. Not dead, but transformed by survival into something harder. He leads a work crew now, having made his own accommodations with necessity. His remaining children work alongside him, their faces bearing the same resigned exhaustion you see in your mirror. The reunion is awkward. Neither accusation nor absolution. Just two men who once shared blood and beliefs, standing in the ruins of both. He tells you Yalampa reached Babylon safely, sends his regards, but no judgment. Your replacement son thrives among the refugee scholars, trying to preserve Mitanni's language and legends. It's comfort and condemnation combined. The boy you trained in survival chose cultural preservation over physical security. Mitanni Muwa asks about your son, and you point to the boy playing among the rubble, laughing with Assyrian children, speaking Akkadian more fluently than Hurrian. This is the future. Children who don't know they're occupying their parents' graves. As the sun sets over the skeletal remains of the palace, painting everything in shades of ending, Mitanni Muwa asks if it was worth it. You want to point to your healthy son, your surviving wife, the silver in your purse that ensures they eat, but the question isn't about them. It's about the man you were versus the man you've become. The kingdom that died versus the empire you now serve. You answer honestly. You don't know. Maybe that's the final mathematics of collapse. Not knowing if survival calculated correctly. If the price paid bought anything worth having.
Years pass. Your son grows into a young man who speaks of Mitanni as ancient history, something studied but not felt. He's brilliant at mathematics, following your merchant training but applying it to Assyrian expansion economics. When he marries, it's to an Assyrian girl from a good family who's never heard the Hurrian songs your mother once sang. Your grandchildren will be Assyrian in every way that matters, the transformation complete in just 2 generations. Tashmishu keeps the old traditions alive in small ways. Recipes that use Mitanni spice combinations, bedtime stories that never mention their origin, festivals celebrated privately under Assyrian names. It's a quiet resistance, barely visible, but somehow essential. You've risen in the Assyrian administration, your knowledge of former Mitanni territories invaluable for their complete absorption. The occupier rewards collaboration well. Your house is large, your table full, your family secure. By every measure that once mattered, you've succeeded. But late at night, when sleep won't come, you hold those small clay figures from your family shrine, feeling their worn surfaces that your parents touched, their parents before them. They're the only witnesses to who you were before the mathematics changed. Sometimes you tell them about Yalampa, the farm boy who chose differently, who sends occasional word from Babylon, where he's become a scholar of dead languages. You wonder if he judges you or simply pities you. You tell them about the kingdom that vanished, not in a day, but in 10,000 small surrenders, each one reasonable, necessary, forgivable. You survived. Your family survived. Mitanni didn't. These are the facts, as immutable as cuneiform pressed into clay. But facts and truth aren't always the same thing. And the truth is that you're a ghost haunting your own life, a remnant of a vanished kingdom, walking through an empire that doesn't know it's built on graves. Tomorrow, your son will present his first major trade proposal to the Assyrian governor. You'll watch with pride and grief intermixed, seeing him succeed in the world that exists, because the world that should exist couldn't survive its own contradictions. This is your ending. Not dramatic, but gradual. Not tragic, but transformed. Not dead, but something that might be worse. Forgotten, even by yourself.
And so you've witnessed it. The unglamorous truth of how civilizations actually end. Not in dramatic flames, but in daily compromises. Not with heroic last stands, but with signature on collaboration documents. Through Kizawatna's eyes, you've seen how survival arithmetic slowly subtracts everything that once seemed essential, until only breathing remains. Your modern bed feels softer now, doesn't it? Your walls more solid. That morning alarm you dread seems almost like a blessing compared to waking uncertain if your city still stands. The currency in your bank account, however abstract, holds more promise than clay tokens becoming worthless overnight. As sleep begins to claim you, let the weight of that ancient story settle into your bones and then drift away. You're safe from the mathematics that destroyed Mitanni. Your children won't need to choose between cultural death and physical survival. The compromises you face tomorrow will be gentler, the prices smaller. Close your eyes and let the last images fade. An old merchant holding tiny clay gods in a conquered city. A young scholar in Babylon preserving dead languages, ruins being carved away stone by stone. These ghosts of collapsed kingdoms have no claim on your dreams. Rest now, in your unbesieged city, in your functioning civilization, in your world where the mathematics still balance in your favor. Tomorrow will bring its own small struggles, but tonight, you can sleep knowing that your kingdom, whatever that might be, will still be standing when you wake. Sleep well, far from the roads where empires end.